He took my engine apart and demanded $500 extra. He didn't know I had a badge. The pile of metal parts sitting on my driveway looked less like a car repair and more like an autopsy gone wrong. There was the alternator, sitting in a puddle of black grease. There was the serpentine belt, coiled like a dead snake. There were bolts, washers, and brackets scattered across the concrete in a pattern that suggested chaos rather than organization. And standing over it all, wiping his hands on a rag that was filthier than the engine block itself, was Rick. Rick was the mobile mechanic I had found on Facebook Marketplace 3 hours ago. He had a profile picture of a pristine snap-on tool chest, 5 stars from 22 reviewers, and a bio that claimed he was ASE certified with 15 years of dealership experience. Right now, looking at him, I doubted he had 15 minutes of experience. He was wearing a stained hoodie, cargo shorts despite the February chill, and he was chewing on a toothpick that bobbed up and down as he surveyed the wreckage of my 2018 Ford Explorer. "Well, boss," Rick said, spitting a splinter of wood onto my lawn. "It's worse than I thought. Way worse." I stood on the porch, my arms crossed against the cold wind. It was Tuesday, February 10th, 4:30 p.m. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the yard. I had called him for a simple alternator swap. The battery light was on. The car was dying at idle. "It's a 2-hour job, Max." "What do you mean worse?" I asked. My voice was calm, practiced. It was the voice I used when I pulled someone over for doing 90 in a school zone. But Rick didn't know that. Rick just saw a guy in sweatpants and a t-shirt on his day off. "The tensioner is shot." Rick pointed a greasy finger at a part that looked perfectly fine to me. "And the mounting bracket is cracked. See, hairline fracture. If I put the new alternator on that, it'll fly off on the highway. Kill you instantly. Total catastrophic failure." He shook his head, making a tisk-tisk sound. "I can't in good conscience put this back together. Liability, you know." "Okay," I said, walking down the steps to get a closer look. "So what are we talking about here?" "Well," Rick pulled a notebook out of his back pocket. It was dog-eared and stained. Original quote was 300 labor plus parts. But with the bracket, and the tensioner, and the hazard pay for working in the cold. He scribbled something. He tore the page out and handed it to me. $800. Cash now. I stared at the paper. The handwriting was chicken scratch. 800. I looked up at him. The quote was 300. "You've been here 45 minutes. You want $500 extra for a bracket? Parts ain't cheap, buddy." Rick smirked. It was a predator's grin. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of stale cigarettes and old oil. "And look, I already got the engine apart. The car is dead. You can't drive it. You can't tow it like this without damaging the block. You're stuck." He leaned in. "So here is how it works. You pay me the 800 cash right now and I finish the job. Or I pack up my tools." Rick shrugged. "I take my jack and I leave your car in pieces on the driveway. Good luck finding another mechanic who will touch someone else's mess at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday." I felt the heat rising in my neck. It was a familiar sensation. It was the physical manifestation of my fight or flight response kicking in, only there was no flight. There was only the realization that I was being shaken down in my own front yard by a guy who thought he held all the cards. He was holding my car hostage. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that if I don't give you $500 extra right now, you are going to abandon the job and leave my vehicle disabled?" "That's the deal." Rick picked up his impact driver and revved it once. Zip zip. "Inflation, bro, prices go up. You paying or am I walking?" I looked at the car. It was gutted. He had removed parts that didn't even need to be touched for an alternator swap. He had dismantled the intake manifold. "Why?" "I need to go inside," I said. "I need to check my funds." "Make it quick." Rick checked his watch. "I got another appointment at 6. I turned around and walked into the house. I closed the door. I locked it. What happens next isn't just a dispute over a bill. It is the collision of a small-time crook and the entire weight of the criminal justice system. By the time I walk back out that door, Rick isn't going to be worried about his hazard pay. He's going to be worried about the fact that he just tried to extort a police officer who is currently holding a recording device and a pair of handcuffs. For full version, kindly follow on screen instructions.